Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 9th Freedom Games in Łódź. Before we finish with all the nice welcome, we have an extraordinary guest for you, and we would like the first words from this stage come from a Ukrainian representative, the person who represents our neighbors who suffer from unjustified and brutal aggression from Ukraine. Let me welcome Tania Malarczuk, a Ukrainian writer and journalist. Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Polish friends, I can speak to you in Ukrainian, for which I am so much grateful, and I trust that the translation in Polish and English will remove excessive pain from my words, and you cannot speak without pain about Ukraine on the 234th day of war. The war started, in fact, 80 years ago. It was hybrid war, but it was ambiguous. Were there war or not? Were there separatists or they weren't? Were there green people or they weren't? Illegitimate referenda, the president shaking hands and signing gas contracts. It's all a lie and manipulation. Only the death of Andrei Poroshenko, my neighbor, in 2014 was true. He truly died. His parents lost the color of their hair and turned gray. I don't know if Andrei would be happy to learn that the aggressor lost this hybrid war, because on the 24th of February this year, they unveiled their peace mask and started the traditional anachronic war nobody ever expected in Europe. They attacked the capital city of an independent country with their tanks. Ever since then, we have all changed. Poland, Ukraine, Europe. We are all different. The world has changed. But still, the world didn't understand how much it would go. The violence we used to read in books about went to headlines, turned to everyday life. I doubt anybody would shudder that 233 days of camps, rapes on children and women, 233 days of bombing hospitals, theaters, other facilities, 233 days of demolished cities, buildings, famine torture, shooting, killing with the shot at the back of the head. 233 days since our language restored the term of mass grave. I am not a pious person, but I remember the words of a Polish philosopher, Professor Kołakowski, who says the devil reminds us of himself too often to forget believing in him. It is his action to get us accustomed to death, to violence on a unprecedented scale. It's his action when we become unemotional to him. We are not killed, but we are forced to see the death of others. I don't know one Hannah Arendt named this evil panel, but it's back. Well, it shouldn't. The European civilization solemnly promised to prevent mass destruction. No more war. But we failed to keep the promise. 233 days I've been looking for an answer to these questions. Alas, I can't find it. why the curse of of Central Europe is still in force. The territories of smaller countries between Germany and Russia. On the year of my birth, Mirek Kundera, a Czech poet, named Central Europe as such. We are under target. We dig earth to build trenches and for graves. Millions are forced to flee to the world where they are not expected. Kundera understood a small Central European nation. He was a member of such a nation. He understood the small nations, perhaps not very small, but those always at risk of destruction. We may always hear from the invader, you do not exist, your language doesn't exist, your history is a make-up story, your house is a sand castle. One blow, it's into pieces. We need to prevent you from yourselves. In Central Europe, you need to keep fighting to survive, to be yourself, which is not understood per se. We remember Prague, Budapest, Warsaw, Vilnius. Today the heart of Central Eastern Europe is in Kiev. The borders have moved to the east near Kharkiv, Mariupol, because Central Europe is not a geographic term, it's a worldview term. Polish, Czech, Hungarian intellectuals would use the term in the 20th century as an antidote against the Russian context. If we cannot be the West, they said, we could prove we are not the East, with its brutal autocratic structure that was an attempt to save the identity, a desperate attempt torn by Russian and German occupation, an attempt to prove that there had always been tradition and culture. Conrad, a Hungarian, wrote posters, who enslaves others will never learn their own freedom. In his program text, he wrote that you can live in slavery, but you cannot accept it. These words and words of Miłosz and Havel prevented me from full despair. Between the news of Bucha and Irpin, I read the old editions of Enslaved Brain and The Force of the Forceless. I also remembered the book of Yuri Androchovich, My Europe, which I last time opened some 20 years ago. Then I didn't understand it. Shame. The love to Austro-Hungarian heritage. What did they want to tell us? During the Orange Revolution, My Europe was translated in Germany and was highly successful, although Central European discussion was of no interest. In 2004, Poland and most of former East Bloc countries joined the EU. Was it accomplished? Was Europe unified? Did the time come to earn money? Central European sentiment talks about agreements turned marginal. Institutions of culture did actually, for a long time, invited the failures from Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova to their meetings and conferences. It was like a sadism to discuss European future with those who had no opportunity to become a part of it. For the first time, I crossed the western border in 2007. It was a sort of a literature festival on European values. Then I saw many German citizen towns in Frankfurt when the taxi driver heard I'm from Ukraine, and he said, Ukraine, is it America, Asia, Africa? He was surprised. He couldn't even understand that a country with such a difficult, different name was on his very continent. Ever since then, I frequently had to write and speak about Europe. I did it with nostalgia and idealism. I always trusted in Europe, though Europe didn't trust in me. And my friend from Moldova, Nicoleta Jasenenko, a writer, didn't spare her anger. Her famous text I often heard during meetings was named "Fuck you, Europe." Nicoleta rebelled against the concrete placed European status quo, and I felt sort of guilty for not matching European standards. Then I heard Nicoleta participated in another project by the European Union, and her task was to live in a hotel named Europe. There are thousands of such hotels, and then she was supposed to describe this experience in a novel. The Europe Hotel, where the project organizers sent her from Moldova, was in Minsk. How did my literature career started in the West? In 2012, my German translation of first book was the biography of an incidental miracle. It received good critique. Germans compared my style to that of Franz Kafka, Bruno Schulz, Olga Tokarczuk, because they were my authorities. No, alas, I was compared to Ivan Saltykov-Shchedrin, a Russian writer of 19th century. A bearded man said to be of good humor. I don't know, I've never read any piece by him. I originate from a pretty different tradition. However, the German critique had their compliment for the Ukrainian writer in the form of Saltykov, even though it had been 30 years from the collapse of the Soviet Union. In the Western understanding, Ukraine has not taken its place. They are subordinate to Russia. Russia plus. Whatever we say, we were listened to. We were heard, but not listened to. I was last told that one person went to Lviv and he could speak about anything but Ukraine's perspective on joining the EU. And it lasted and lasted. Ukrainians started to pay with their lives in Maidan for their will to be Europeans. Distrust of the West and blind faith in Russian propaganda are the reasons for this war. Something broke in Western Europe one day. It went all wrong. The European idea vanished, filled up with welfare at any price. The European idea didn't turn out to be the solution for all the problems, but being the goal, it didn't allow to see the forthcoming disaster. Although I'm only a writer and my last book in Ukraine was a set of poems on unhappy love, I feel this desire to need to process the concept of new Europe, self-sufficient Europe. The process is going on. I'm just verbalizing it. Stick together before Russian aggression as a natural defense reaction. No Central European country is able to oppose the autocracy on their own, but they can do it with the support of their neighbors. We are allies by joint experience of fighting for survival, by joint traumas, and two fears: the fear of the East that wants to devour us, and the fear of the West that can betray again. I grew up in a country with poisoned landscapes on the bows of dictatorship. I picked up mushroom where innocent victims were buried. I played in playgrounds that used to be cemeteries. I danced in a rural club, the club that was built on tombstones from Jewish cemeteries. That is Europe also. To process the trauma we need courage and peace. To take responsibility for your past, you mustn't be worried about your future. Me, as a Ukrainian, I found it very difficult. But after the Dignity Revolution, we set on the right path. And although institutions wanted something better, society formed with the experience of protest, a successful process, not ideal, but one that brought social changes. The Ukrainian society cannot think of a dictatorship where we are victims or collaborators. The choice the Ukrainian nation made on the 24th of July is simple but terrifying. My female colleagues went to the front line, or their husband did. I know 10 writers who used to claim being pacifists and translated Mahatma Gandhi, grabbed weapons and went to the front line. Today is the day of Ukrainian defense. But they defend not only their independence, their homes. We all understand it. The future of Europe is decided by Ukrainian armed forces. Glory to Ukraine.
Ladies and gentlemen, this presentation deserves a huge round of applause. They should become a symbol of our friendship and solidarity with the Ukrainian nation that is not only fighting for their own freedom, they are also fighting on our behalf. A great round of applause. Thank you very much. It's not only the honor, but also great joy to meet with you again in this beautiful facility of EC1, which symbolizes the renewal. We are in the building of the former power plant, which is now housing the Institution of Culture. So we cannot imagine a better place for a meeting of people who are interesting, who want to debate on the most difficult topics, the most difficult challenges we are facing. For the next 3 days, we will focus here to make sure that we inspire each other, we share knowledge, we make questions, search for answers. We are the people who will work together to become stronger. We have invited excellent experts, people of idea and great hearts, agents of change, to talk how to agree on the issues that are important to our survival, how to face challenges that do not recognize any borders, such